Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bot Podcast, where we interview movers, shakers, and innovators and talk all things conversational user interfaces. I'm your host, Chad Oda, and today we have a very special guest with us. We have Rachel Batish, the co-founder and chief revenue officer of Conversation.one. So Rachel is an accomplished entrepreneur with expertise in growing companies from inception all the way to large-scale success. She has a highly diverse array of experience, from social and philanthropic causes to being a Techstars mentor and a co-founder of Zuz Now. So at that, Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Chad. Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. So before we get started, I always like to ask sort of a unique question. So something I've been seeing a lot in the chatbot and voice space is people that are sort of coming from an education background of sort of English and literature. And I was taking a look at your educational background. It looks like you've done things in German literature and in English literature and political science and European studies. Like, how do you sort of feel like that's been able to, sort of give you more perspective on conversational user interfaces?
That's such an interesting question. So, and a good one. I haven't thought about it this way, but I think that if you are looking at my background, so conversation and interaction and communication between people has been, my thing. And I think that, as we transition into communicating with, bots or with computers or with something which is automatic, then I think that I could see where my added value comes on top of just, the technology itself. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot of localization in terms of how do you say things, right? But before we started, the podcast, he asked, how do you pronounce, my last name? So those are things that are still lacking today. And I think that as we build our product today, we put a lot of emphasis on that. And we also see the challenges, right? When it comes to how do people interact, not necessarily in different languages or different cultures, but even within the same language or culture, how would they interact using voice as opposed to chatting? Will people use like real sentences talking to a device, or will just say, just throw commands at it? So it's a nice point. I haven't thought about it, but definitely this is what I keep, when we build a product. So interesting point, Chad.
Definitely. I think a great segue from that is, with your background, how did you initially get interested or involved in the chatbot and voice space? What was like that catalyst for you to be like, okay, we're going to transition from the mobile company that you're currently working at still, and sort of make that sort of maybe logical segue to sort of the next platform being voice and chat?
Yeah, so actually this is exactly it. So we see chat and voice as the next interface. Mm-hmm. So we had the desktops, we moved into different forms of mobile, right? We had the tablets, the smartphones, and then there was a transition where conversation came into play. So I think more than just chatbot and voice, we're talking about a different way of interaction. So we're kind of shifting from, the classic GUI where we see things and we need to choose, to something that we actually hold a conversation with another thing, so not another person.
Right.
So the transition from mobile to voice and then chat was very natural in a way that it's complementing what we've been doing until now. And the way I see it, it's actually going to totally replace it.
Right. No, absolutely. Because I'm sure you've been seeing those like sort of trend statistics of like, mobile app, downloads are going totally down. Mm-hmm. And if you think about like sort of from a, intuitive and like frictionless experience, like chatbots and voice sort of embody that. So it's sort of this natural, logical progression.
Yeah. I think that we're definitely in this direction. I think that the concept behind it is that I think when we were introduced to the internet, or to the huge amount of data that we can just browse through and find whatever we want, I think we're kind of going backwards right now, and we're saying we don't need all of this data. We have very specific questions. Just give me the answer, right? So don't just throw all of that data on me. So just like you said, instead of now going to the website or going to the app and start browsing for what I need, and usually today those websites, they hold a lot of data. So finding ourselves there is a challenge. So it's just easier for us to go and just ask something. I think that we still have the challenge though today that most of the bots that we're interacting with, and I think that everyone who listens to this podcast would agree, are not that good in providing us those answers. But it is a process. We're doing much better than we did, even a week or a month ago. And I think that this is the challenge where we're going to see improvement of NLPs, of how we build a conversation, of actually holding a conversation and not just, a question and answer and response. So those are thrilling times.
No, absolutely. So you sort of touched a little bit on, the sort of market opportunity at a high level. Do you mind sort of delving a little deeper into that specific market opportunity that, Conversation.one is addressing? Mm-hmm. And, what in particular sort of differentiates you guys from sort of the competition?
Yeah, so maybe just as an introduction to what we do. So when we started Conversation.one, and as you've mentioned, we transitioned from the mobile, we had two main goals when we built our solution. So the first one was more around democratizing the setup of voice solution. We actually started from voice and then added chat since we understood it's part of the strategy, for every business. And by democratizing, we said, let's try to make it easy, but still make it smart. So just having a chatbot, answering very, very simple question was not our goal. Our goal was to go and take the more complex use cases and enable them for even non-developers, right? We're seeing, we could talk about it as well, but we're seeing also new roles, right? New positions. So voice designers, right? Who are not developers, but are still building the flow itself. And once we started building the platform and enabling it, the idea was to provide our customers with one place where they can build their business logic, which they know best. And then our platform is serving as an abstract layer that lets them deploy it on all the different devices and channels that are around voice and chat today. So we started with the Alexa and Google. We added also a chatbot, a texting solution, a complementary phone solution. So that's a whole new thing about, changing the way IVR is handling today. And one of the things that we've noticed, and we talked about it just earlier, is that, a lot of those chatbots or voice and that are supported by different NLPs today are not that smart, and they're actually pretty stupid, and they could be very frustrating for the end user. And if we go back to the reason why we're having chatbot for a business, the whole thing is to better serve our clients and to be able to do it at scale without spending too much money that doesn't prove the ROI. So with this in mind, we started analyzing what is it that we have that could improve those interactions. And we came out to one little thing, which is called data. And since we are connecting our customers with different sources, whether on the chat or on the voice, we are capable of listening to what people are asking, and using deep learning and crowdsourcing methodologies, we're improving the level of understanding of those responses. So it's not just making it easier to build, but it's also improving over time. So we understand when people are asking something and the device doesn't understand what he is being asked. We come up with a recommendation back to the user to try and solve this problem. And if we can't solve this problem, we take this specific sample or utterance that the user was saying, we do the analysis, we push it back to the model so that the next time someone else asking it, they would be able to get the response they were looking for. So all in all, I think that in terms of going back, to the competition, so we're focusing a lot on the large use cases, the more complex use cases, the self-service use cases that, take out the burden from agents in different companies. And again, focusing on what we call data management. So there's a lot of data that, coming through those solutions, which companies today are not leveraging in any way. In some cases, they can't. And that data with this automatic classification is the value that we provide today for our clients.
Absolutely. No, I think what you guys are doing, we're seeing this sort of logical progression where there was all these disparate solutions that existed in the marketplace. And with your platform, I see this consolidation where you guys are sort of adding all those components in there, so it's one cohesive solution. And I think that will begin to become the status quo for these platforms that are emerging. And I think that's partly the reason why Gartner had sort of mentioned you guys, I think, in one of their analyst reports, and that came out 3 or 4 months ago, I believe.
Yeah, so if you already mentioned it, yeah, so actually Gartner did recognize us as cool vendors just a couple of weeks ago. In the space of AI application, conversation application development tools. And yeah, I mean, again, lessons learned from our mobile solution, we see a lot of fragmentation. So many devices, many different, NLPs, channels, use cases. And I think that as a company, if you want to build your strategy and not build, siloed white elephants, you'll have to find a way to consolidate it. It's even to a point where we work now with customers who already built something. So maybe they had a chatbot or they had an Alexa, but they understand that taking it to all other channels is pretty massive and requires a lot of efforts. So we even ended up creating like tools to help them migrate what they already built, take advantage of it, and spread it out, through all the different channels. So
yeah, that's a really cool feature, actually, because you guys are actually helping people migrate the pre-existing solutions. Because I've been looking at a lot of platforms and I haven't seen a lot of people supporting that. Maybe it's because it's relatively new in the market to have these comprehensive platforms, but I think that's a really cool feature. So switching gears a little bit, because I know at this point, I think I had saw a video and you guys said you were onboarding 50%, you guys had like a growth of 50% per month user growth. So I sort of want to go back a little bit to the beginning. So what were some of the initial successes that, your team and you guys saw that really encouraged you to be like, okay, there's something here, let's keep going. That success was awesome. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So when we initially launched the solution, our main focus was financial institutions. So we built into the platform also pre-made conversational flows so that we literally have a 3-step wizard that lets you launch your conversation application on all the devices you want in less than 5 minutes. And we had a soft launch, and we started reaching out to a couple of, credit unions and banks that we were in touch with, also from the previous platform. And immediately we saw the engagement. So people just found it very intuitive, very easy. And in just, a couple of days, we had 100 or different, financial institutions actually trying the platform, building it. Some of them also actually went all the way and submitted the skill to the Amazon or the Google. That was actually a funny story, because at that time when we actually launched, Amazon were not accepting financial institutions. So that was a little bit discouraging on our side, but we figured that out. So today we're actually we're the only approved platform for financials on Amazon, but at that time, a lot of customers came back and said, oh, we can't launch on Alexa, but that's nice because we could start on Google or we could have a chatbot. So I think that was something very encouraging. And I think even today, when we demo the platform or when we support customers who are, leveraging the solution and they need help with something, I like it when they do the deploy to Alexa and then they start talking to it and it answers them. And I think every now and then there's those, whoa, that's so cool response, right? So that's a fun thing. Or I have to show it to my boss now. So, and I think that's pretty much encouraging. And obviously, the way the market goes right now, that shows us that we are in the right space and that we are moving forward and that we are supporting one of the most, advanced technologies out there. So I think this is something to wake up for.
No, that's very cool. That's very, very cool, because I think it was sort of maybe a more natural transition from what you guys are doing with mobile to voice and chatbots, whereas I think a lot of other people are starting from ground zero. So that's cool that you guys already sort of, had that experience.
Yeah.
So I know you said some things were discouraging. So I also want to hear about maybe some of the initial challenges that you guys face entering this market, because I think for a lot of people, this was sort of a new industry we were all moving into at this point. And, there are not best practices or standards from a UX or NLP or, how we leverage context that were really in place. So can you talk maybe a little bit about those and how you guys have been iterating to sort of address, the developers or UX people's needs?
Yeah. So I think you touched one of the main issues, and it's the fact that the chatbot market. So we started with voice and we added the chat, but people just looked at it as one thing, right? And the chatbot market had its expectation, and then just went down with what the heck, right? What are those things actually doing? What should we do with it? It's not really functioning. And this is always and still a struggle to come and tell people, look, it could be smarter than what you have right now. And I think one of the challenges is competing with other platforms that lets you build things very easy, very fast, but that have no essence in what they're offering. So our challenge was to try, first of all, to convince people that chatbots do make sense, and voice bots can support their efforts. So that one thing. The second one was to encourage people who already built bots that are very simple to take it to the next level. So don't just let it answer your FAQs. Let them transfer money. Let them check on their account. And people are a little bit more conservative in taking it to the next level. So I think this is, again, another challenge that we had. Mentioned also the challenge we had with the Amazon team. They were very helpful all along, trying to help us help other banks, launch on Amazon Alexa. It was a very long process, though. Took us around 6.5 months to get the certification, and we already had banks waiting to launch. But now we've passed that, so that's good. So I think more and more it's around the bad name that chatbot got, and then again moving the market into actually trusting it and convincing our customers to be a little bit more revolutionize or try to revolutionize the space and not just go according to to what other people just did. And I think that you could see it also today if you browse through all the Alexa skills, or if you look at through the Facebook bots that you have, most of them are not something, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're trying to shift that and make something more efficient, or something that makes more sense. But I think the market is also shifting towards this. So you mentioned context. People are expecting this. So when we talk with large customers right now, they don't want that FAQ thing. So they want to see that the bot understand and can connect to requests and provide the answer. They want to see that if I started a conversation on a chatbot, I can continue that same conversation when I get home and talk to Alexa. So those are the challenges we deal with, on the technical side, but also on transitioning people's mindset.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with your sentiment. I think large in part, it's really this education that people need to understand at this point. And that's the real battle, and I think that's probably something, that everyone in this space needs to sort of work on to sort of raise this visibility for, people that are interested in this may not really understand what the limitations of the technology are. So I completely resonate with that. So that's sort of where we are right now as far as the adoption cycle. But I know your company probably has a vision, far beyond in the next 5-10 years. So what really is the end vision or the greater vision for Conversation.one?
So maybe before Conversation.one, I think the end vision, or not the end vision, but the vision for voice, I really do believe it's going to change, and it is changing the way we interface with computers at the end. It's computers at the back. I always like to take the movie Her and say, this is how I see it, for the bad and for the good parts of it. And I think we're not so far. I mentioned my daughters before the call. I see the way they interact with the Alexa or the Google devices, and their expectation or their communication level with it is a whole different level from, the way I would interact, right? So, and I work in the field and I'm, and all that, but I'm too old for that. So my kids will talk to it. They will ask it for homework help. They will ask it whether they're asking Alexa, do you have a boyfriend, right? Or who do you love? Or what music do you like? Things that I would never consider. So I think the vision for voice is something that we should expect to be taking every part of our interaction. Once again, I'm not saying it's going to replace everything. When mobile came, people said it's going to replace the desktop. It's not replacing. We're just adding more and more layers.
Right.
And I think voice is also very natural for us. So why not take advantage of talking, right? Instead of texting or, doing all of that. For Conversation.one, I would like us to be, a big part of this change. So I would like us to be able to create what's needed for those interactions to really be meaningful for other people. So taking advantage of the data classification that we have. So I have in my presentation that I make, I show that if we're looking only at the English language and we try to build sentences out of a 3-word combination, we get to 5.5 quadrillion options. And that's just American English, right? So assuming we can't, pre-configure all of that in advance, and those are just, 3-word sentences, I hope that Conversation.one will be, the engine behind building those conversations based on what people are actually asking and talking to those devices. We could pre-think in advance whatever we want, but people will have their own way of asking for things, of thinking what they can ask, and interacting with the solution or, with the channel that they're talking with. So this is where I want to see Conversation.one. I think we are taking baby steps toward that vision. I want us to be, an industry standard so that people are not building stupid bots. They're building smart, automatic solutions that help us reach our goals, which are, again, provide better service at a lower cost in a good scale.
Absolutely. No, that's a great vision. And, speaking of stupid bots, I remember at the conference in Tel Aviv, remember when Michael Furnick got on stage and asked the entire audience of 1,500 people, has anyone used a really good bot? And one guy raised his hand and Michael's like, oh, this guy's probably lying, right? Yeah. So, now it's, 3-4 months from that conference. Have you used a good bot, whether it be a chat bot or a voice bot that you really liked and you thought was a really good experience?
It's a good question. I think that on the voice side, not necessarily a bot, right? But I think the interaction with Alexa and Google are really getting better, right? So asking them for a question or trying to communicate with the, built-in skills or actions that are in there, I think it's a good experience. Coming from the finance world, I also see some nice solutions that we see. Capital One are, one of the leaders in this market, and they are very innovative. So I think, from the point where they started with their Alexa skill as to what it offers today, I think the experience is pretty good. I still don't see a lot of contextual, interaction. So it's still just, providing me with responses to what I need, less offering me or trying to support me on that. But still pretty good. There is also some nice kids solution that we see today in the market. One of the winning skill was called Kids Court, something like that. So providing Alexa as a judge and trying to talk to kids from, something that they are fighting about. So I found that also very, very nice and very intuitive for kids to use. Still lacking that contextual, very driven by events. But yeah, it's a good question. I think that also maybe from my perspective, I'm being a little bit more critic when I interact with a bot. Obviously, our clients have wonderful bots that they've built. But yeah, I think we're getting there. I'll have to think maybe as we talk, maybe something will pop up again. But I think whenever you get the response that you were looking for, depending, on the different levels that you're interacting, I think it's good. I have tons of, examples of bad bots. But I could say that for me, any bot that, if we're talking about a chat bot, any bot that is not providing me with a web view is a successful one. So forcing me into choosing, from different options, clicking from a menu, this is where, from my standpoint, this is not a chat bot. This is a small web view that is not helping me right now. So yeah, that's it's a good question. I think it's still very difficult to answer. I think that for very fast and very clear interactions, there are some businesses that do offer that. For the more complex one, still lacking in seeing it.
Yeah, no, I think your sentiment is very similar to pretty much the majority of people that I've spoken to, from like the Netherlands or Singapore or Australia or the US or UK. Everyone really has the same sentiment, because I don't think we've clearly arrived yet at that like Uber, mobile first moment, or the eBay moment for, the internet.
Yeah.
I don't think, we really know what that is yet. Maybe people's expectations are too high. That could be it. Or maybe there are just significant obstacles from a UX and NLP and contextual perspective that are sort of holding those things back.
I think people expectations are maybe too high, but I also think that what businesses are providing today is too little.
Yeah.
So I would want to see, so it's true that there are some constraints and, there are some technical stuff, but I think people should be a little bit more brave when they roll out those solutions. So thinking, what could help? I think that if you're just rolling out something just for the sake of having it, knowing that no one's going to ask those questions, it's just creating a bad experience for the user, and they will never use it again. The numbers show, right? If a chatbot failed you, 87% rate that you're not going to use it again. Doesn't matter if they tell you we're better now. So I think that also on the business side, there's a lot of thinking around it. And I think that businesses at the beginning didn't understand that this is a thing. It's not just a side thing that you do. This is an ongoing process of improving what you're offering on your bot. It's just like every other digital solution that we have today. If you're just going to build your website and it's not going to serve me to anything, I'm not going to use it. It's the same on the bot. And there is no magic. There is work that needs to be done. You need to think of the use cases. You need to make sure that you're monitoring your solution, that you're increasing its coverage, that you offer more and more options, that you are supporting different requests, that how to handle, like chit chat conversations to make it sound, everyone know it's not a real person, but try to show that you know your people. So there's a lot of work that needs to be invested. And I think that, as always, if the ROI is not clear, if we can't show that this bot just reduced 10%, 20%, 30% of the burden of your real agent, people are not going to invest in it. So as much as I would say, maybe users have big expectation, I would also encourage the businesses to be a little bit more brave and more offering.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you, because I think, when I think about the stages we're at right now, it's like, stage one was everyone thinks, all use cases are chatbot and voice use cases, right? And I think we're slowly getting to like 1.5, which is like, okay, now we're looking at use cases that would benefit voice over chat contextually, right?
Yeah.
If you're like driving in a car, maybe using a chatbot's probably not so safe. So let's, use voice.
Do the voice. Yeah.
Or if I'm cooking, maybe voice, right? Or if you're in public, use a chatbot. So I think that's where we're getting to now, where we're beginning to understand, based on a use case, this modality is the correct one to utilize. And I think even moving beyond 1.5 per se to 2.0 is we begin to establish like best practices in UX and NLP and context management. And I think that's when we really begin to see, much more interesting use cases come about. And I think that will be sort of that foundation that will enable and drive that. I think beyond that, and I think you guys are sort of integrating this into Conversation.one, is really that sort of multi-channel, multi-modality experience where now it's across channels and we're getting this very intuitive experience that has all those sort of foundational elements, right? Whether that's, the UX best practices or NLP and state and context management across Alexa, across, SMS chatbot. And I think that's where we can get to. But still with that, there are a lot of challenges with interoperability. Uh-oh, it keeps triggering my Alexa over there. But no, I think, we're making good traction, I think, as a industry from a trend perspective. But speaking of like sort of where we're at now. Oh.
You just triggered my Alexa, who was telling me that I'm having this podcast with you right now.
Yeah, mine was doing the same thing. I got to make sure to shut that off next time. But I think that just goes to show, like these voice user interfaces and chatbots are becoming like this, like, this element of our lives that, is just sweeping the entire population right now. So it's a good sign.
It's a good sign. It could also be a scary side. It's another person in your house. And you've probably seen the publication yesterday. Alexa was recording something and sending something to the boss of that person.
Oh, man, I just saw that. Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple kinks, and I think that's a good segue to my next question, actually. I think we're at a good place now, but what do you see as like sort of the major obstacles or opportunities, depending how you look at it, that really need to be resolved to maybe get to this next level?
Yeah, so I think we kind of talked about that and covered. So I think that once we understand the use case, it's going to be easier. And I think also the challenges are different, right? From whether we compare chatbots or voice enabled, because something like, it sits in my house, it listens to me, or on the other hand, I'm using a Facebook Messenger bot, they're listening to what I'm saying, right? So I think that everything around privacy, security is still a challenge and should be a challenge. And those are things that needs to be addressed, both by those vendors like Amazon and Facebook. But obviously, this is also something that businesses have to consider and users. So I think we're kind of used to having less of a privacy. And I'm saying that in the week where everyone got their GDPR new terms email. But still in the US, I guess, we know that when we use Google and Chrome and things are following us and they know us, and we also take advantage of it, right? I mean, it's nice for us that they know us because they give us what we're looking for. So those are challenges that we'll continue and see also in using those devices. Other challenges, as you said, are definitely around NLPs and fragmentation of the market. I think that as far as devices vendors and NLP providers will keep the information for themselves and it's not being shared with the customers, it is a challenge for the business to learn from, something that we're trying to address using our platform. So the data that we're collecting is transparent for the user, for the business, so that they could leverage it to improve the conversations. Other challenges that I see in the market is actually, I think there will have to be a generation shift to see that taking over. It's also interesting to see, I mentioned my daughters, they are very intuitive into talking to those devices or using chat and finding people on chat. I was just, she just got her email, her first email account. And the first question was like, how do I find my friends? And I was like, you don't find them. You write their email address and she was just going back to her chat experiences, right? Her conversation experience, but how do I find them? So that's an interesting shift. And on the other side, you have the elderly today who are a huge segment that takes advantage of solutions, that are Alexa and Google like, right? As a companion at home, as something that can help them. They never really moved into the mobile and the chatting option. So they're still stick to the phone. So voice is also a very great component there. So there are, the people that are in between, our age, you younger, but my age, and, somewhere in between I guess, like 35 to 50 who are still somewhere in the middle. So we'll see that shift in generation. And I think some of those challenges that we have today will disappear, probably also in terms of concern around privacy and security.
No, absolutely. No, I think that's, yeah, GDPR, that is sort of a wake-up call. And yeah, I totally agree with you. My email inbox has been getting spammed, as I'm sure most people's are. But I guess looking at specific insights, or facts that sort of surprised you along the journey, I think the audience would love to maybe hear about some of those, because I think right now so much stuff is going on. So it's really great, when we could hear about like, something maybe we weren't expecting that the users were doing, and maybe it could be a best practice or something of that nature.
Yeah, so I think that as a whole, I wasn't expecting to see voice taking over so much. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's just a hype. I think that, seeing the numbers of how many devices are sitting, at homes, and the numbers grow, and I see it in my home, and the prices are also so low that it, almost each room in our house has, some kind of a device. So I think that was a huge surprise. When we started out thinking about the solution, it was the end of 2016. There was a huge shift into voice and those enabled devices. Another huge, negative surprise was to see Apple's HomePod and its lack of innovation, and so, old generation. It looks good, the hardware is good, you could hear very nice, but there's nothing that you can do with it on top of it. So in some way a surprise, in another way not such a big surprise, because Apple were always so close and are not opening for other things. So I would expect to see that changing. I would hope to see that changing from a company like Apple. Other surprises, not surprises, maybe just haven't thought about that really, but I see retailers are really, really scared of cooperating with anything around Amazon Alexa, which makes sense, again, and I think could really give a boost to Google Home, and I would want to see them taking advantage of that as well. A lot of retailers are very conservative in sharing information, and knowing that Amazon is keeping that data, you could definitely see that. Another thing that I would look for is to see, and we talked about the opportunities that Amazon are providing now for donations, right? So the whole process of enabling a skill and making a skill available, I think it's not a good experience, as opposed to the Google Home, where you just ask for the action, and if there is a need for some account linking, you'll do it, but it's there. Right. So I think that was a surprise, seeing how advanced Amazon Alexa, platform is working. That was a surprise that this is still the way that we need to communicate. And I'll another nice surprise that I would say around for us around chatbots and voice is to see how large organizations are, on the one hand, really struggling to see how they can leverage it, but on the other hand, also investing a lot. Some of them are investing, huge budgets into seeing how they can get, the thing of voice to work for them and not them working to make it enabled. So those are kind of, good surprises also that we see on the market. I think in terms of surprises, I think this is as much as I can think of right now.
No, yeah, definitely. I guess speaking of large enterprises investing a lot more money into this space now, do you, from the customers or the people that you've talked to, do you see sort of a shift in design and development methodology as far as like chatbots and voice are concerned? Because I know, back in 2017 and, going to a lot of these conferences, it seemed like, whether it was companies in the financial sector or other enterprise companies, when they started building bots, whether it was voice or chatbots, they had these very complicated solutions and all these features on there. And then they realized all these things started breaking because, these standards weren't in place. And then many of these companies began sort of scaling back their implementations to much simpler things. I think there was a insurance company from Sweden that all they do on their chatbot that they released was you can file a claim for a stolen bicycle. So do you sort of see, these larger enterprise companies, whether it's in like the financial space or other spaces, begin sort of ramping up the complexity, or do you still sort of see it at this sort of, initial stage of let's build something simple that works?
Yeah, so I think it depends on who you talk with. And as we talked also earlier, so it's a lot about education. So it's, telling people you could do more, right? I mean, it's not just this. I think that in terms of the enterprises, we do see the shift. We see, the use cases that some of our clients are working on. So those are, more complicated. It's not just information. It's a self-service, path that they're taking from, filing a claim, but also completing your payment and, transferring the money and all of that is definitely there. I think that people are still very cautious, especially since, we see a lot of efforts of people, just trolling your bots, right? So you don't want to look stupid. It's very easy also to, take something that your bot did and, throw it all over Facebook and Twitter, and then you lose your reputation. So I think people are also very cautious on that, and that makes sense. But there is a shift into, first of all, the understanding that, what the bot can do for me. Why do I need it? Not just to have it as for fun, but to actually see people using it and taking advantage of it. So 30% of people said they prefer to talk to a bot than to a real human, right? So there is a huge opportunity there of 30% that could do things by themselves. So definitely see that happening right now with the enterprises. I also think that enterprises are being a little bit more creative as to how to differentiate themselves from other solutions. So going back to the mobile time, I think it's still a lot around the fireworks around it because we're cool and we have that. But also a lot of functionality thinking. So what would make sense? Another thing that we see that enterprises are thinking of is, so working cross-channel is also very important. And also the capability of connecting conversations. So taking advantage of the phone. If I talk with Alexa, something doesn't work, I could hand over to a real agent calling me. Or using solutions like LivePerson to hand over, a voice or a chatbot interaction to the live agent platform. So I think that looking at all those components, I think it is a time where enterprises are putting a lot of thinking into how they leverage it. I think they understand the ROI. They're just figuring out how they can maximize it as opposed to, just offering the very simple things.
That makes sense, because I think a lot of companies now sort of see it as an adjunct. There are some, very specific use cases that are generating significant ROI. Companies like Lemonade, it's like you've processed and sold over 100,000 policies. And I think that's a great litmus test that sort of shows, provided you execute and design and maintain these solutions properly, there can be significant ROI derived from these solutions. But I think you're right. I think it's sort of, take risks, but at the same time, be practical about what those implementations look like. Yeah. So actually, speaking of education, I know that I think you just released a book about building some of these different solutions. So I was wondering if you could maybe share a couple, maybe UX or NLP best practices that you've been highlighting in your book.
Yeah, so the book hasn't yet been released.
Oh,
it will be released in July, so stay tuned. Yeah, the book is all around voice and chatbot design. A lot of emphasis on the voice side because I think this is also very important. Some of the things that I'm highlighting in the book is helping us to move into the conversational interaction. So not just the chatbot interaction, but actually having a conversation with something or a device, a channel, which is not a human on the other side. And we're talking here about contextual conversation. So, one of the challenges is if I'm going to tell you, if I go to the bank and I tell them I want to go on a vacation, they would understand that I would need a loan, or that I would need to maybe, take some money out or something like that. If I'm going to do that today with a chatbot or with Alexa or, with anything, it will just tell me, I don't understand, right, what you're talking. And there could be thousands of those examples of contextual conversation where if we talk to a person, they could understand a lot of the information from the things that we're saying and even not saying. So reading between the lines, where a chatbot can do that in most cases, because this is how we build them.
Mm-hmm.
It is a little bit more complex, from a technical point of view, from an NLP point of view, but it is possible. And again, going and giving the wings to the developers and telling them, do that. Think of how you could, make the experience better. A good example that I also provide in the book is that if I want to travel somewhere and I'm talking to an agent on the phone and I'm saying, we're a family, we want to travel in the summer. There's so much information that the agent on the other side can collect from, that sentence that a chatbot today usually doesn't. So I'm a family, I have adults, I have children. I want to go in the summer, so that would be anytime between June to August. And all that data that today is still being collected in a, when do you want to go? How many people? How many adults? How many kids? So trying to shift from that. Another good tip that I always like to keep in mind is that we see in many cases where the transition to voice is done from the web instead of transitioning from human to computer. I'll try to explain that. When we moved from human interaction to human computer interaction, we built the GUI, right? So we have a graphic UI and we translated our interaction into something that we can present. What I'm saying is that when we are building a voice conversation today with a chatbot or, with a voice bot, we should take the same way we talked with a person and translate that into the chatbot or the voice bot. We don't have to go through the web experience and then bring it back to life as voice. When we do that process, we are killing the natural conversation. So instead of giving me, let's say, the Expedia experience of where do you want to fly, what are the dates, and all that, try to think how I would interact if I would call my agent and not duplicate the web experience. So it's kind of hard because I don't think some of us probably don't even remember how we talk to an agent or how we talk to a banker, but this is the work that we should do. And again, on the other side, don't force me into doing what I would have done on the website on a small chatbot screen, right? That's just not going to work. I know most of the chatbots are working this way today. Choose this or that, choose from a menu. I could have done that on the website. Give me something that I can ask my question and get the answer. This is how it's going. Think about texting with your friend. You're not asking your friend, where do you want to go out tonight? Choose from the following options, right? It's try to keep it conversational and try to think as if it was a real human. Maybe one last thing, even though we're trying to build a conversation as if it was a real human, I would still recommend to make sure that the person on the other side understand that it speaks to a bot. Don't try to pretend it's a real person. You're just going to kill it, right? It's very easy to trick a bot. You want to make sure that your clients understand that you make the effort for them so that the bot is still learning. It could help you with certain use cases, and you want them to come back because they know they could do that. Don't try to pretend it's a real person on the other side.
Definitely. I've seen people try to do it both ways, and I think you're right. I think when it's just bad practice in general to try and mislead your users. Mm-hmm. But when you do it and they think it's a real person and then the bot breaks, it's just terrible experience. Right. So right. I think it's like until we get to this, whenever we get to, general artificial intelligence, right, where we can handle all these edge cases, it does make sense to say, this is a robot. Here's sort of the scope of things I can address. And, if it can address it from what I've seen right now, the best practice is handle it, hand that to a live agent or something.
Right.
Definitely. So on the topic of best practices, for some of the audience that is just getting into voice or just getting into chatbots, are there any like resources that you've seen or read that you would recommend?
So it's an evolving space.
Besides your book, by the way.
Beside my book that's going to be out there in July, of course. And I'm actually going to shoot my own leg, because I would say keep yourself informed from online information. It's changing so fast. So do yourself a favor and, try to follow people who are building those solutions, who have recommendation. Don't take it, as is. Think about it. Think if it makes sense. I think that Chatbot Magazine is a good place to start. If you go on Medium, there are a lot of good information that you can follow there. Obviously, all the people that Chat is interviewing are good, a good place to start from, following them and their information. I think that also on both on Amazon and Google, you could find some, best practices. What I want people to take from this call is that don't limit you to what other people did. Try to think how you would vision the solution. Take out the technical obstacles. Don't think about that. Try to think from a visionary point of view and try to see how the technology serves you to do that. So as long as you have that in mind and you read what other people are saying and don't look for the common denominator, right? Try to do something more than that. And I think that a lot of the people in this space are really leaders. And you could see how, we're challenging each other, right? So someone's doing something and you were like, wow, I didn't think about that. We should see how we do that even better, right? So this is the place where we are right now. But I would say the Chatbot Magazine, and if you go on Medium, there's a specific area also for that. And try to maybe also deepen the understanding around how NLP and all that kind of solution actually work. It doesn't have to be from a technical perspective. I'm not a technical person, but just understanding how it works, understanding its limitation, maybe trying to think maybe there is a better NLP that you guys can use when you're building your bot. For example, on our platform, we offer people to use whatever NLP, solution that they want, as long as it's possible. Obviously, on solutions like Alexa, you can't choose your NLP, or Google, but do try to reach out to, some sources to learn more about that.
No, great advice. So I will sort of let you take the floor, because I know that there are a lot of, interesting and exciting updates that Conversation.one, I think, is sort of rolling out in the near future. So feel free to let the audience know what's going on.
Yeah, so first of all, I haven't mentioned it, but the platform is open for everyone to use. You'll just go on Conversation.one, there's a login button, and you could all just, go inside and start building your bot and voice applications today. We're lucky to have more than 3,000 developers leveraging the platform. So there's a lot of capabilities that are offered there where you will not find it in any other place. We support multiple languages. We support also multi-language interactions. So, the same bot or skill or action could reply at the language that the person is talking to. So that's also an exciting thing that we just rolled out. We've completed our integration also in partnership with LivePerson. So this is something which is really easy now, as you said, to hand over to a real person. So I would just want everyone to go in and play with it and eventually also launch your solutions. Every now and then we see our skills and chatbots, popping up wherever. So let us know. And just, go and build it and experience it. And we'll continue, to support the community and help. And definitely if someone wants to consult or, just raise some questions, so we'll be happy to answer. We have our customer success team. They're helpful on the dashboard. And yeah, other than that, yeah, we are going through a very exciting times, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to go on these podcasts. I know it was very difficult to schedule, but I've learned a lot. So thank you, Chad, also.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So one more question I ask all the guests before we leave. What like keeps you motivated or inspires you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for every startup as a whole. But I think that those little successes that we see on the way, people that are excited using our platform, seeing more and more people leveraging our platform, seeing ourselves as thought leaders, seeing other people seeing us as thought leaders, keeps us going and running. And so many challenges that are still out there to try and solve. And I think that we wake up every morning into solving more and more of those challenges. Seeing, our customers happy and expanding their, coverage and the amount of channels that they're supporting, that keeps us going. And of course, the fact that, it's not just us in our office and little homes, it's everywhere. So voice is everywhere. And we're lucky to be in that space, I would say in the right time at the right place. For me, it's also really nice to see, since we are focusing on financial institutions, I think it's very nice to see how they are thriving into, offering those solutions and do their best to provide something unique to their customers. Also keeps us moving, and we try to keep it in our head in more difficult times is, those little appreciation moments. So we talked about it earlier. We were announced, as cool vendors by Gartner. Just earlier this month, we won the Finovate. We won the San Francisco Bridge US Ignite Award for our work with San Francisco Airport. And, once that thing's going to be launched at the San Francisco Airport, that's like a huge thing to keep us going and moving. So yeah, those little successes, I guess, and just being a part of this huge change that we see coming up right now.
Very, very empowering response. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being on the podcast today. I'm sure we'll definitely have you back sometime in the future to talk about some of the new crazy innovations that you guys are cooking up. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Chad. Thanks, everyone.